Webster defines crunch time as a critical moment or period, like the end of a game, when decisive action is needed. Every sports fan knows this time in the game. Your palms sweat just a little more, your heart races just a little bit faster, and you live and die with every play until the final seconds tick off the clock and you're either celebrating a victory or disappointed by the defeat. The team at Crunch Time Sports Advantage Network understands just how critical these moments are. For us, it begins as soon as the next set of games are on the board. We evaluate the opening lines and any breaking news throughout the week. We cover each game inside and out, whether it's from inside the locker room to a huddle down on the field, the court, or the ice. We take you inside the meeting room with scouts, coaches, and executives. We have our fingers on the pulse of all the sports that we cover: the National Hockey League, NBA, college basketball, college football, and the National Football League. We are the Crunch Time Sports Advantage Network, and we're here to help you find your sports advantage. After all the data has been crunched, we then turn it over to Kenneth for the best analysis around. His unique perspective in both understanding the data and how it applies to the game and how you win is the Crunch Time Sports Advantage. Are you ready? The Crunch Time Jet is fueled and ready for takeoff, and the Crunch Time Express is about to leave the station. Your VIP pass has been approved, so all aboard.
Welcome to the 2024 College Football Team Autopsy Report. An autopsy report is a document that summarizes the findings of an autopsy, an examination of a body after death. It includes details of the examination, tests, and observations performed, as well as the cause and manner of death. Just like a real autopsy report, the Crunch Time Sports Advantage Network College Football Autopsy Report examines a team's body of work after the season has concluded. This report includes a review of the team's season win total and whether they met expectations, key offensive, defensive, and special teams metrics that shaped the season, a deep dive into coaching decisions, including situational play and fourth down aggressiveness, a final season grade, evaluating execution, performance in key moments, and consistency, the final verdict, analyzing what went right, what went wrong, and what must be fixed for 2025. With the 2024 season in the rearview mirror, it's time to examine the patient. To present the findings, we have called in our Chief Medical Examiner and Senior Analyst, Kenneth.
Folks, it's time to put back on the lab jacket. Welcome to the 2024 Missouri Tigers Team Autopsy Report. We're heading up to beautiful Columbia, Missouri. We're going to spend about the next 27 minutes as I look at the clock here talking about the 2024 Missouri Tigers. Let's start with the head coach, Eli Drinkowitz. In his 6th year as a head coach, winning percentage of 67%, which is absolutely amazing. Now, spent 1 year as the head coach there at App State, parlayed that into the job at Missouri, and in his 5 years as the head man there in Columbia, 38 wins, 24 losses, win percentage of 61%, back-to-back 10-win seasons, 10-plus win seasons, I should say, after a rocky start, kind of building that program back up, but back-to-back 10-plus win seasons, capping that off with 2 bowl game victories. Eli Drinkowitz definitely has the arrow pointing up for the Missouri Tigers. This is your first time with us, welcome aboard. If you've been with us, you know how we lay things out for you. So whether you're watching this on YouTube, streaming this on our Twitter feed at Crunch Time VIP, or listening on your favorite podcast platform, want to say thank you so much. Let's start with the season win total. Now, Vegas had this team as a 9.5 win total. So if you took that over, even though Missouri had a really good regular season, you did not get to the pay window with that win total because they would have needed to get 10 regular season wins to get you that ticket cash. So fell a little bit short there. Now, when we look at our composite win total during the season, basically judging your team on three very unique but very predictive data points, we actually had this team a little bit less than where their win total was, 7.7. So basically, this should have been an 8-win team. I think once we take a look at that schedule here on the screen, I think I'm going to be able to quickly identify that game from a data standpoint, which we think that they should have lost, but they actually got the win. Now, let's talk about two scheduling data points, your strength of schedule and your strength of record. Now, your strength of schedule, you can only control the non-conference portion of that. Basically, did you test yourself out of conference or did you load up on cupcakes? A 448 win percentage, strength of schedule, I should say, was only 46th in the nation last year. So going to tell me that Missouri did not, from a power ranking standpoint, face a over daunting schedule. So not getting to that 10-win plateau, probably a little bit disappointing there. Now, as far as your strength of record, you absolutely have no control over it. This is basically how did your opponents do from a win-loss standpoint. And when we look at 5.515, 73rd, you're going to see some teams in here with some records that are not top shelf, if you will. So if we pull up that next graphic, and like I said, podcasting listeners, don't worry, I got you covered. Murray State, we will discount that as an FCS opponent. Buffalo was 8-4. Boston College 7-5. Vanderbilt 6-6. Texas A&M 8-4. UMass 2-10. Auburn 5-7. Alabama 9-3. Oklahoma, Boomer Sooner was 6-6. South Carolina 9-3. Mississippi State 2-10. And finishing up the season with Arkansas at 6-6. Folks, this is a schedule that Missouri should have taken better advantage of. And I said that I would take a look at that close game that they won that they probably should have lost. Look no further than the game against Vanderbilt, winning that game 30-27. Folks, Vanderbilt had every opportunity to capitalize in that game and just came up a little bit short. So that, from a statistical data point, was the game that we were targeting. And absolutely, from a metric standpoint, that's probably the one that I would say Missouri was fortunate to come out of that game with a win. I'm going to talk quickly about the quarterback here in Brady Cook. An okay season. In 12 games, completed 63% of his passes, a little bit less than 63%, but only 11 touchdowns to 2 INTs. Just did not put the ball in the end zone nearly enough there to really get this team over the top. Now, let's start breaking down the offense, and we'll do that in a very unique way here. We want to look at how good were the defenses that this offense faced last year. And we're going to use a baseline of 68. So that's how many Power 4 teams there were in 2024. Boston College was the 55th rated defense. Vanderbilt 32nd. Texas A&M 30th. Auburn 39th. Alabama 6th. Oklahoma 8th. South Carolina 7th. So they did the little 3-step there with the top 10, and then finally ending the season with Arkansas at 44th. So when you look at it, looks like about 8 of their opponents were inside of that top 68. However, that is offset by an FCS opponent that we don't include into that power ranking, but the other 3 Division I teams that they faced were all outside of the top 100. Buffalo was 113th. UMass was 126th on defense, and Mississippi State was 108. You're talking about an average power ranking when we average those out of about 52. This would have been a defense that would have probably been on like a 7-5 team at best there. So did not face a gauntlet of great defense, and that's despite playing 3 teams inside of the top 10. When you look at playing 3 teams outside of the top 100, that absolutely balances more so in towards a weaker schedule than a tough one. And that's why their strength of schedule sat where it sat, and that's why their strength of record sat where it sat. Now, for a team that won 9 wins, and we said periodically we would do this. So where did Missouri finish the regular season for us in some of our rankings? Overall, we had the Missouri Tigers as the 24th best team in college football. From just a pure power ranking standpoint, they were 31st. And in our Crunch Time Sports Advantage College Football Playoff Committee rankings, the Missouri Tigers were 24th. Now, let's take a look at the offense of numbers in a little bit more detail. We'll give you for the offense the NCAA average, Missouri's data point. We'll call that the accounting stats number, and then we're going to give you our adjusted numbers for that category. So, average team last year in college football averaged about 28 points per game. Missouri on the books, 29.1, but when we adjust that for opponent, just goes down a little over a point to 27.8. So basically right there on the average when we adjust that out. The average team passing yardage per game was about 227 yards per game. Missouri was at 220. When we adjust for opponent, goes down to 208. As far as the rushing offense, average team last year about 160 yards per game. Missouri was at 171, but when we adjust that for opponent, actually goes up to 198. So this run game was a little bit better than what the data would show. And then total offense about 387 yards per game. Missouri was at 391 per game, but when we adjust for opponent, goes up about 16 yards to 407 yards per game. Let's dive a little bit deeper into some of these metrics here on the offensive side of the ball. So average team last year, their drives ending with a score, touchdown or field goal, about 40% of the time. Missouri was at 46.6%. Average team last year, drives ending with a touchdown at 29%. Missouri was at 30.6%, so a little bit better there. Now, here's where Missouri was really good, and that was third downs. Average team last year, 39%. The Tigers were at 46.7%. You'd have loved to seen against this kind of schedule for their points per game to be north of 30 points per game. Definitely would have got them to that 10-win plateau. They were right on the average with sacks last year, 24 sacks allowed, and only committed 9 turnovers. So great job of taking care of the ball. We pointed out Brady Cook did not throw a lot of interceptions there. Same could be said for his backup there in some spot duty in Drew Pine. Threw 3 interceptions last year. So from their 2 quarterbacks, a total of 5 interceptions. That's not horrible. Now, looking at our 3 E's, basically how effective, how explosive, and how efficient were your offense last year. For the Tigers, 31st effectiveness ranking there. In explosiveness, this team just could not generate big plays, 72nd in that metric. And finally, as far as efficient offense goes, they were 54th. The Missouri Tigers ended the regular season as our 55th ranked offense in college football. If I had to sum it up, balanced but absolutely lacked explosiveness. This team averaged 5.5 yards per play. The average team last year was at 5.8. The rushing attack, I talked about it being a strength. Should have ran the ball a little bit more, given some of the success that they showed. Could that have possibly cost them a game or maybe even 2 on the schedule when we look at it? Because they lost 2 close games against, they lost a close game to South Carolina that possibly could have tipped the scales in this team backdooring their way into the college football playoff. All right, now let's flip it over to the defense here. And again, we'll use that baseline of 68. How good were the offenses that the Missouri Tiger defense faced last year? Well, Boston College was 54th. Vanderbilt, 51st. Texas A&M, 22nd. Auburn, 56th. Alabama, number 2. Oklahoma, 62nd. South Carolina was 19th. Mississippi State was 39th. And Arkansas was 35th. Average power ranking for the Division I opponents, 48. Again, not the most challenging set of offenses that their defense faced last year. Now let's take a look at the defensive metrics here, and I'm only going to give you their accounting number and our adjusted number for these categories. Points per game allowed, 20.1. When we adjust for opponent, goes down to 17.4. Their pass defense gave up 186 yards per game. When we adjust that for opponent, goes up to 199, still below the NCAA average there. Same can be said about their rush defense. Accounting numbers say 134 yards per game. When we adjust that, it goes to 126, significantly below the average there. And as far as total defense, 319 yards per game is what they gave up. When we adjust that, goes up just a little bit to 325, still well below the NCAA average, almost by 50 yards there. Now, let's take a look at their opponents' scoring drives. Their opponents' drives ended with either a touchdown or a field goal 30% of the time, almost 10 percentage points below the average there. As far as their opponents' drives ending with a touchdown, as you can expect when a team only gives up about 20 points per game, their opponents weren't finding the end zone a lot, 18.4%. Again, almost 15% percentage points better than the average, and absolutely great on third down defense. Only 25% is what their opponents were converting on third downs. This team was right at the average as far as sacks for the season, 23 sacks on the season. That's exactly where the average was. Their opponents converting on third downs, a little bit above the average, but not by much there. 22 attempts and 12 conversions is what their opponents were, about 55%. The average was about 53%. So this team did an okay job of forcing turnovers. When you think about how many they committed, 16 forced turnovers, pretty solid job there. Their defense was absolutely the bedrock of this program last year. In their 3 E's, effective defense, they were 17th. Gave up a few more explosive plays, though, 50th. Ranking there, and as far as efficiency goes, they were 29th. The Missouri Tigers defense finished the regular season as our 32nd ranked defense. So bullet pointing the defense, tough, efficient, but not overwhelming. We talked about it, gave up some big plays there. You don't want to see that, but they were, like I said, excellent in third downs defense. So when this team wasn't giving up big chunks, they were getting opponents off the field. Let's take a look at their special teams numbers, because special teams, poor field goal kicking is going to jump off the page at me. 19 for 29 in field goals. They're 66%. That's about 10 percentage points below the average there. Made 27 out of 28 extra points there. And the punting was absolutely one of their stronger suits, almost 45 yards per punt. There, that puts them in the top 20. Now, as far as coaching and situational play here, the Missouri Tigers were absolutely lights out in one-score games. This speaks to how quality of a coach that they have in Eli Drinkowitz. 5-1 in one-score games. Phenomenal. 83% there. Now, against quality opponents, they were 4-3. If you add one more win to that, this team is absolutely cooking with hot grease there and possibly finds their way into the college football playoffs with that 10th win. And as far as being aggressive on fourth downs, Coach Drink will go for it about 12% of the time last year. That puts him 97th out of 144 qualifying head coaches there in Division I football. And their conversion rate would kind of speak to not being that aggressive. 19 attempts, 10 conversions. So a little bit below the average there for a team last year. So what did go wrong for Missouri last year? We talked about it, the lack of passing explosiveness and deep threats, especially when you consider some of the weapons that they had last year. You're talking about a high draft pick and Luther Burden last year, 61 receptions, 676 yards, 11.1 yards per reception, 6 touchdowns. The rest of his wide receiving group did not really excel whatsoever. Theo Weiss had 60 receptions for 884 yards, 14.7 yards per reception, but he only had 4 touchdowns. So between the two of them, they were about right at 120 yards receiving. With those two wide receivers, you would expect that all of those numbers across the board to be a little bit higher. So we got okay quarterback play out of Brady Cook, not nearly good enough there. When we look at the run game there, Nate Noel, 11 games, 163 carries, 818 yards, 5 yards per rushing attempt, 3 rushing touchdowns. But pretty much the bell cow back was Marcus Carroll. In 13 games, 140 attempts, 595 yards, 4.3 yards per carry, but found the end zone 12 times. So he was probably their finisher when they got down by the goal line, and looking at his data, did a really good job of punching the ball into the end zone. Let's take a look at the offensive and defensive splits here for the Missouri Tigers and see if we can't spot any trends that may help us get ready for the 2025 season. In their 9 wins, Missouri was averaging 34.3 points per game, 238 yards per game passing on about, let's call it 32 pass plays per game, 7.5 yards per attempt, telling me you're not pushing the ball down the field even in the games that you won. 11.6 yards per completion kind of tells me your wide receivers not getting more run after the catch there, those yak yardage that we absolutely love to see. Now, the ground game, 42 rushing attempts per game, 186 yards per game rushing, 4.4 yards per rushing attempt. This team averaged about 74 plays per game when they won, to the tune of 424 yards per game in total offense, 5.7 yards per play. Like I said, just not enough big time explosive plays either in the run game or the passing game. On third downs, this team was absolute money in those 9 wins. 51.5% conversion rate on third downs, converting 2 out of every 3 attempts on fourth downs, only committed 5 total turnovers in those 9 victories. Now, in their 3 losses, offense absolutely struggled, only 13.3 points per game, 165 yards per game passing. So a 73-yard drop there on 29 attempts. So the attempts were there, the yardage wasn't. And when I said they weren't pushing the ball down the field, yards per pass attempt goes down to 5.8, almost a 2-yard per attempt drop off. You're not pushing the ball down the field there. I don't know if it was play calling or quarterback play, but something was broken with this passing game last year. 10.5 yards per completion in those 3 losses. 35 rushing attempts, so almost a drop of 7 run plays per game, and the rushing yardage per game goes down to 126 yards per game, 3.6 yards per rushing attempt. This team had 64 plays per game, so almost 10 fewer plays, and the yardage goes down by 132 yards per game, only 291 yards of total offense in those 3 losses. 4.6 yards per play. You're just not going to get a lot done there. And they were basically a net 0 in their total touchdowns per game and turnovers per game, 1.3 to 1.3. 4 turnovers there in those 3 losses. And the third down conversion, absolutely abysmal, only 24% in those games there. Let's take a look at the defensive split, and I think we're going to see kind of the same similar track here. In their 9 victories, the defense was only allowing 14.7 points per game. Opponents passing the ball for 154 yards, we'll call it, on 25 attempts, 6 yards per attempt, 10.7 yards per completion. Opponents did not have a lot of success running the ball when Missouri won. 32 rushing attempts for 110 yards per game is what they allowed, 3.4 yards per rushing attempt. 54 yards per play, 54 plays per game, I should say, is what this defense was on the field, only giving up 263 yards in total offense, 4.6 yards per play. Phenomenal job there. And as far as defensively, this team was lights out on third downs. Only 24.5% is what their opponents were converting on third downs, and they forced 15 of their 16 total turnovers in those 9 victories. In the 3 losses, 36 points per game, 281 yards per game through the air on 26 attempts. So giving up big time yardage there. 10.8 yards per passing attempt. That's telling me your opponents were pushing the ball down the field with great success on your pass defenses in those 3 losses. 15.3 yards per completion. Explosive plays coming out of the passing game against this Missouri Tiger secondary. 36 rushing attempts. The run defense almost doubled the yardage in those 3 losses. 205 yards rushing is what this team gave up last year. Almost 100 more yards rushing in those 3 losses. 5.7 yards per rushing attempt. This defense was on the field for about 5 more plays per game, but giving up 487 yards per game, almost doubling the output there by their defense. 7.8 yards per play. Basically, folks, every 2 plays, Missouri was giving up a first down. You're not going to win many ball games with that kind of metric. Their opponents almost averaging 5 touchdowns per game to the tune of 42% on third downs. And I mentioned it, only 1 forced turnover there in those 3 losses. I think we're ready to get to the final verdict here. The 2024 Missouri Tigers will get a final grade here from us at a B+. We like the win-loss record, but this team was absolutely horrible in their defensive metrics, and their passing game absolutely struggled. Now, this team was absolute money in performing in close games. That earned them that B+ instead of a lower grade. The final verdict: Missouri was a disciplined and a tough team that exceeded expectations. Their ability to win close games were key, but their lack of explosiveness and poor special teams cost them in key moments. In our final couple of minutes here with you, I'm going to give you 3 keys for the Missouri Tigers in 2025. First and foremost, got to improve that passing game and generate more explosive plays in the pass game there. Key number 2, we talked about it, tightening up the defensive coverage against elite offenses. When this team stepped up in weight class, they absolutely got their lights rocked. Over 280 yards per game passing, and not to mention the run game giving up over 200 yards. When you're giving up nearly almost 500 yards per game in total offense, that's not a recipe to win, especially in a conference like the SEC. And then the third key, you got to fix the field goal issues there. I talked about the field goal conversion rate of less than 66% there. When the average team is at 76%, poor field goal execution will absolutely cost you a game, and I would not be surprised if it didn't cost Missouri last year. If the Tigers can improve in these 3 areas, the Missouri Tigers can remain as a top-tier SEC contender in 2025.
Thank you for tuning into this podcast. We hope you enjoyed today's episode and our deep dive into all things college football. Don't forget to subscribe, rate, and review the show on your favorite podcast platform. And if you're watching on YouTube, be sure to like this video and hit that subscribe button. You can follow us on Twitter at CrunchTimeVIP for updates, insights, and more content. And make sure to visit our website at crunchtimesportsadvantage.com for in-depth blogs, game previews, and information about our Crunch Time Express handicapping packages. Thanks again for listening, and we'll see you next time for our next patient on the 2024 College Football Autopsy Report.